They have not concluded. Nobody's concluded. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to conclude that the Crown Prince did it. But I will say this, I don't know. I don't know. But whether he did or whether he didn't, he denies it vehemently. It's a very important ally. And if we go by a certain standard, we won't be able to have allies with almost any country.
U.S. President Donald Trump has stated his position on Saudi Arabia. The country is an ally despite the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Trump is disputing the CIA's reported findings that the Crown Prince ordered the killing. Here at home, the federal government is still reviewing its relationship with Saudi Arabia in light of Khashoggi's death.
Canada does not find the explanations that have been offered by Saudi Arabia to date to be credible or coherent. As far as Canada is concerned, this case is very much not closed.
So how should Canada respond? Roland Paris is a former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's now a professor of international affairs at the University of Ottawa. Hi, Professor Paris.
Hi there.
Great to see you again. Thanks
too.
for coming in. So the big news, at least south of the border this week on the Khashoggi case, was the president coming out, and I mean, the headline of his statement was that he and the U.S. stands with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. How did you interpret that? How significant do you think that was?
Well, nobody really expected the United States to abandon Saudi Arabia. It has too many interests involved in that relationship. But that statement from President Trump was pretty extraordinary in its own right. It was like a blank check to Saudi Arabia in the wake of this appalling action in Istanbul. And it's a terrible message. It's a terrible message to send not just to the Saudis, but to other autocratic leaders. And the message is, go ahead and kill your adversaries, kill journalists, lie about it, and the United States isn't going to force you to pay a price for that.
What about the line of culpability and the discussion that's ensued since? So we've got leaks, for example, of the CIA saying that the Crown Prince was directly involved, if not responsible, and they keep coming fast and furiously over the days, and the president keeps getting asked about them, and he says, well, maybe not, maybe so, you know, and then he starts saying, I don't believe it. What do you make of the role of the intelligence community in this, and what the president is saying about that?
Well, there is already a mountain of circumstantial evidence pointing to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, as having a responsibility for these actions. It's just hard to imagine, given who was involved in the nature of the action, that he would have not at least known about it. And the job of the intelligence community is to make assessments based on the evidence that's available, secret evidence and also open source evidence. So their conclusion was that bin Salman would have known about this. But Trump is right that there's no smoking gun evidence. And in the absence of that really definitive evidence, he's doing in a way what he did with President Putin with allegations of Russian interference in the 2006 presidential election. He says, listen, we don't know for sure, and President Putin said he didn't do it, so let's just move on. When you
take like the position of the United States and the statements that were made in the last week, what do they do to, or what kind of stage does it set for other countries, including our own, and what effect does it have on the actions that might be pursued?
Well, you know, international relations, foreign policy is always full of trade-offs and difficult decisions. And as I said, I would have never expected the United States to abandon Saudi Arabia given their strategic interests. But the lack of any consideration of the human rights concerns in the way that the Trump administration has approached this reinforces the perception that the United States is no longer there as a leader in human rights. And it really falls to other countries to do what they can, hopefully working together to stand up for some basic principles of human rights, even though in this case, for example, in Saudi, you know, the fact that the Crown Prince has now a blank check from President Trump means that his position is assured. There's only so much that other countries can do. Nevertheless, we have to take action together, because there are limits to what we should be able to accept, willing to accept.
What's your level of faith that will happen? Because it's not just the U.S. who's saying, kind of hands off. It's also France and the U.K.
Yes.
That's a different dynamic as well. And does that also take off the pressure?
Well, I think that it's a wake-up call more generally for liberal democracies to work together as much as they can to try and draw lines and to support each other when they're drawing those lines. In this particular case, it's very tough because, as you say, the United States has taken its position. France and the UK are unlikely to suspend their arms shipments. Germany has suspended arms shipments. A couple of other European countries have as well. And it's something that we should consider. I think that Canada should suspend any further deliveries of military equipment to the Saudi regime. And I do. And I think that we should be sanctioning the individuals who were associated with this murder. Do
you think that is that an easy thing to do? And I'm talking logistically even, right? Because I know that there are exports permits that have to be signed. Does that just mean you just don't sign any further ones?
The government can suspend the export permit should it choose to do so. And, the terms of the contract are complicated and they're confidential. The Prime Minister has hinted at some of those complexities. But we've reached the point, or we're beyond the point where it's tenable anymore for us to be providing military equipment to the Saudi regime. And if there are consequences, then I think that we can deal with them.
If Canada doesn't pursue that course of action, because to be fair, it's been a long time now of them considering what action they'll take, and I get the idea that they're waiting for allies and that the G20 is coming up, but it has been weeks and weeks and weeks of the same type of lines coming from the government. If they don't pursue that course of action, what is the cost?
Well, I'm hopeful that the government will move towards this decision quickly. I would like them to. We'll see if they do. I think that the cost of not acting in this way is that we are willing to go along, in a sense, with a situation which is intolerable. So, as I said, foreign policy is full of difficult trade-offs and it's a messy world. But there are moments when you have a stark decision. And the stark decision before us is whether we stand up for the rule of law or succumb to the law of the jungle. And we need to make that decision. I hope we make the right one.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Professor Paris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.